You can get Pokemon cards for way cheaper than you think. Just yesterday, I was at a Pokemon card show and I got over $1,000 worth of value and I only spent $360. I want to show you everything I got, but more importantly, I'm going to give you 7 tips to really maximize the value you're getting for the least amount of money. Tip number 1, go to shows. I'm pretty confident that even if you're in a small city or nearby, that you'll find a Pokemon card show. And there are a lot of great reasons to go to these, and it's not just about money necessarily. People may say this a lot, but the social aspect of going to these is actually pretty valuable. It gets you excited for cards, you get to see a ton of stuff that you wouldn't normally see, talk to people that you wouldn't normally talk to, and you can just have fun without even spending a whole lot of money. And in terms of the tips I'm talking about, going to shows is way better than buying stuff online. There's several reasons for this. You actually get to discuss one-on-one with the vendor or whoever's selling cards. And when you can do that, you can build like a little bit of a personal relationship. You can get deals over time if you're a repeat customer, stuff that you kind of don't get if you're just dealing with a username and buying through the internet, eBay, whatever, TCG Player, however you normally buy stuff online. The other really obvious benefit is that you physically get to see cards. A lot of times when you're buying stuff on eBay, online, people score or grade their cards in wildly different ways. So one person's LP might be someone else's HP. Like the scale is massive. So if you can physically see the card, you're not just relying on pictures. You can see a lot more of the details that you wouldn't be able to get online. You can avoid buying cards that you would have been tricked into buying online with scratching that is not shown in the pictures or creases that are expertly hidden when people take the pictures of them, which has happened to me before, very annoying. And in the reverse, some vendors push their stuff too low and you can get stuff that you think is actually better than what they're saying because you can physically see it and not necessarily relying on just what they think the condition is. There's also somewhat of an emotional aspect with holding a card. Being able to physically see it may make you want it more or less, and you might have a slightly more emotional bond to it. It really depends on who you are and how much you like Pokemon, but I find I get that a lot with some of these vintage cards that I'm finding. There's another key thing here, and this is maybe more relevant to auction style sites like eBay. You're not actually bidding against people when you're talking to vendors one-on-one. It's possible that multiple people want the same card, but usually you make a deal or you don't, and you might circle back around, whatever, but you're not actively bidding against other people. And you get a lot of that on eBay that drives up the price. You end up getting suckered into things like that. If you're comfortable just with the prices that you're thinking and being able to walk away, you don't need to get yourself into any bidding wars, and it's just a lot smoother of a process. You may be saying that a lot of this also applies to local card stores, and that is true. The one kind of caveat there is that at card shows, it's basically like having 30 to 100 local card shows all at once, which means you can go to multiple vendors. You're not sucked into making a deal with one single person. You can find the best value card, the best price that you can find there, and you kind of don't get strong-armed into things. Personally, I've been finding that the local card stores are really hit and miss with this kind of stuff, and it's a lot harder to get value out of them. It's kind of dependent on where you are and if you have good stores or not. A lot of people are kind of getting into the hobby just to maximize profits. Totally fine, it's a business. You can find stores that have people that actually love the hobby, and that's great if you have those, but I feel like that's becoming an increasingly smaller percentage of the stores that are out there. At a card show, you still get a mix of that, but it feels like you can scope out the people who are into it as a hobby and are willing to make deals and stuff with you much easier. I know with some of the people that I've talked to that they felt maybe a little scared to go to some of these, and I just want to say that it's probably the least scary way to buy cards. Like going into a store is definitely more scary than going to a card show. You could literally stand there for 2 hours at a vendor and just flip for a binder and they're not going to care. Everyone can be so friendly. You don't have to spend money. You can just chat with people. You don't have to chat with anyone if you don't want to, if that's not your thing. It feels like a very low pressure environment because there's just a bunch of people in there. You can kind of just blend in, do your thing. So if you're maybe fearful of going to one of these things, don't be. Give it a shot. Okay, this brings us to our second tip. Pay in cash. This is not even necessarily a Pokemon specific thing. This is true when you're basically buying anything person to person. Cash is king. There's an emotional response when they see cash, when you mention cash. It's such a physical thing, having cash in hand, that people make a connection with it instantly, and you can often get better deals just by having cash than the person beside you trying to pay with e-transfer or something else like that. There seems to be an innate sense of safety if you have cash, that neither of you are trying to rip each other off, and that there's no scamming happening. So you can build trust really quickly if you're talking in cash. At this card show I went to the other day, I was able to pick up quite a haul of cards. Several cheap modern stuff and some very not cheap vintage stuff. And I'm pretty confident that this stack of cards would have cost me 3 times the amount I spend if I tried to buy this stuff online. There's also a super direct benefit of dealing in cash. you're not paying tax. These vendors are not calculating tax on things that are happening. It's basically private sale, so you don't have to think about it. If you go to a local card store, you're often paying tax on the cards that you're buying. And depending on where you live, that can add up to be quite a bit. For myself, living in Ontario, Canada, that's 13% additional on every card. So that's a lot of savings not having to do that. Of course, cash is not the only way to buy stuff. You can e-transfer and Venmo, like I mentioned before. You can even make trades, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. But this stack of 17 bangers that I picked up was mostly through cash, and a lot of the deals I made would not be doable if I wasn't doing cash. I've teased these cards long enough, so let's talk about tip number 3, condition. With condition, I really mean a couple things. Like I mentioned in tip 1, you get to physically see the condition of cards, which is helpful for making the deals that you want to make, getting the cards that you actually want for your collection. Even more so for finding deals, what I'm talking about is finding cards that are in lesser condition, but once you hold them, you realize that they're still good enough for your collection. I find this a lot. So if I'm searching for cards on eBay, I'm typically not buying anything worse than MP, and even then, that's pretty rare. I'm usually LP or better. But there's a ton of cards that I'm seeing that are marked way worse than that I wouldn't have classified as bad as they are, that I end up buying. I picked up these 12 cards all from one vendor, and these 4 right here are a perfect example of this exact thing that I'm talking about. Let's take a look at them. So my intent going to this card show was to pick up vintage stuff. I'm actively collecting Team Rocket right now, but I also want to pick up all the Gym set stuff and the Neo set stuff. All my favorite sets, basically. So I was keeping an eye out for that kind of stuff, and one of the early booths caught my eye because I had a bunch of it. And interestingly, they had a lot of stuff that was marked pretty low. Let's start with this one, this Heracross. This is honestly one of the sickest Neo cards that there is. This menacing Heracross fighting a pincer. Just love this card. So it caught my eye real quickly. Now you can see there's a big MP sticker on here and a $30 price tag. This card in near mint goes for around $51. We're already like pretty close to, around 60% of the value. So enough that I'll take a closer look. So let me pop it out of this top loader here so we can get a proper look. So MP usually means quite a bit of whitening, dings, potential creases, things like that. Some people are way more aggressive with how they grade things. So we can see here, there's so little wrong with it on the front that I was baffled immediately that it was MP. Now, as a binder collector, the front is the most important thing for me. I am not grading these things, and a lot of these tips are not that useful if you're intending to grade cards, except for going to the card shows and physically holding stuff. But most of these vendors are already trying to grade stuff, so typically it'll be slim pickings for deals to grade. Back to this card. I mean, you can see that there is a tiny bit of whitening on the top and the bottom. I've seen people call this near mint on eBay, which is, they shouldn't. This is at worst an LP, and it's barely an LP in my opinion. The front is super clean. There's a tiny little ding in the bottom here that you can't see if you flatten it down correctly. And the back just has those tiny little bits of whitening on the top and bottom. So I'm basically getting an LP card at their MP price. And this is a reasonable MP price. The actual price I paid for this was about $24. So less than half the value, or less than half the cost as a near mint condition one. And this is just a little bit worse than a near mint condition one. Great start. Okay, let's look at another one. This is the same vendor. So we can see, after finding one good card, I figured, let's look at the other vintage stuff they had. And they had a bunch of stuff that really caught my attention. Slow King, another great card. Same set, this Neo Genesis set. And this Slow King typically goes for, in near mint, it goes for about $73. So it's a pretty expensive card normally. And they had this marked at less than half of that because it was HP. So heavily played typically is about 50% of the value. So if they thought it was HP, it made perfect sense to put it at 35, but let's actually take a look. They got these perfect fit sleeves on here, which is always a good sign that a vendor cares for their cards. Perfect fits, top loaders. Now, I don't know about you, but it's pretty rare to get an HP card with a front that looks this good. Now, again, I'm not grading these, so the centering is not perfect. I really don't care about that. It's not that bad for a card like this. A lot of times people put HP because there's like little bits of dirt on here. So like this little mark here, that'll come off. Those little black dots is like mold and stuff like that often will wash off. Now, HP often means that the back is pretty chewed up. There's a couple scratches here, but it's only from very specific angles that you can see it. In general, this is just a beautiful looking card. And you can see why they graded it worse than the Heracross. It's because there's a pretty noticeable little bite out of it. But again, I have seen people call this type of condition LP because most of the edge is good. This right edge, no whitening at all. Bottom edge, just super minor whitening. Same thing with the left, and then just this little chip out the top here and here. Now these are so minor that I would theoretically classify this as LP as well, MP at the absolute worst. And again, the front, there's not a single mark on here. So I'm getting a super good deal right off the bat. It's half price, so it's priced at HP. I'm basically getting an MP to LP card for it. And again, because of the previous tips I've talked about, paying in cash and doing this stuff, buying cards in bulk like this, especially when you're doing cash, means you can get even better deals. So I'll tell you the total price from this vendor after, but because of that, I got a great deal. And this card, effectively, I paid $28.30 for. Yeah, so I got a $72 value card for $28. Okay, let's look at another one. We've keep going through the examples. Same vendor again, another HP. We'll fire through this one quickly because it's a very similar story to the Slowking. This Sabrina is worth $75 near mint. And HP, about half the value is typical. Let's pop her out and take a look. I should mention that some vendors don't like when you take their stuff out of top loaders. You always ask. Ask if you can take stuff out of binders. Ask if you can take stuff out of top loaders. Sometimes they'll do it for you. Some vendors don't care at all. But always get permission for that kind of thing. And for cards like this, it is definitely worth inspecting more closely because you can find just great cards like this. Now, the front is a little more beat up than the Slowking was in the bottom corner here. And there's, again, these little speckles of dirt, which will wash off. I don't know if people realize that. You can clean cards really easily. You can even get rid of creases pretty easily. But typically, I still avoid buying stuff with creases because it affects the durability. It just affects it sometimes, and sometimes you can't get rid of the creases. Sometimes you can. Anyways, these little gummy things clean off. So people docket marks on condition for something that can clean off super easily. The hollow is super good on this card. There's no scratching at all, really, just maybe a tiny bit there. Normally, I don't like buying trainer cards, but when you're completing sets, you have to. But the Sabrina card was really cool. The gym trainer cards are really sick. Now, on the back, we can, again, see why this person had marked it as HP. It's a little more damage than the Slowking. We got some whitening at the top here, some whitening down here. Sides are pretty good. If you ignore this corner down here, this would be an LP again. So I would call it MP myself. It doesn't have any bends or creasing or anything like that. And a lot of times MP for people means that. So this person, again, condition-wise, marking it so low. Now this corner here is kind of bent up, just part of the card. So you can't actually see it really well from that it's bent from the front, but from the back you can. Maybe I can show it on camera that it's like half bent. Most likely, I will be able to flatten that because the actual card is still there. It's not chipped away. So you can see it sticking up there. I don't want to do it right now because I want to be more careful with it. But really, again, getting a great deal on this card. I paid $24 for this. And yes, it was a $75 card near mint. So super good deal again. Okay, final card. And this one is interesting. They marked it as damaged. Now, typically, you stay away from damaged cards, but because I found that this person was being very strict on how they conditioned their cards, I figured I'd take a look. And this is a card that I wanted for a little while because it's one of the cheaper Neo Hollows. I think it's kind of cool. Like the steel types are kind of cool. They're too dark with the background with the black text, but you know, the first set's having steel cards, pretty cool. So this is one where I definitely took it out because I was trying to find the damage. Damage usually means there's like a full crease through a chunk out of the corner or whatever, what have you. And the front looks really good. So there's a little mark here. Because of where it is, they basically don't care. And there's a little mark in the top left here. And from the front, it's barely noticeable. From the back, it's a little more obvious. It's kind of swelled up a little there. You can see the rest of the card is super good. Like if you ignored that corner, this again is in the LP tier potentially. With that corner, I can understand MP or HP. I think I'd be able to flatten it out a little bit. So if you put a little elbow grease into restoring some of these cards, and by elbow grease, I mean using a Q-tip and spending 30 seconds to clean it and something smooth and flat to flatten stuff down, you can resurrect cards pretty easily. Now this card, less expensive than these other ones. The near mint one goes for $26 and they were asking $10. If it was actually damaged, I would have walked away. I would definitely would not have bought this. But because I don't really consider this, like in terms of a damaged card, this is nothing. Like this is going to look good in the binder. You're not even going to see that little thing there. I paid $8.10 for it. Super good deal. Okay, now you can see the power of finding cards that people are strict on conditioning with, talking with the person, getting a sense of what they're selling and how they condition stuff, and making deals like this. You can get incredible value. I would say this is like, as a ratio or percentage of value, this was my number one win here. It's all about finding the right vendor for something like this. And let's say it's most likely you would find at least one person like that there. So it's not like a super rare thing that I stumbled across these, because there's other deals I made with the same kind of approach where I saw stuff that I think was maybe under-conditioned and was able to make deals. This brings us into our next tip. Like I mentioned, I got all this from one vendor. So I was already buying these 4 cards, and a lot of time vendors have these out in cases or like top loader binders, and then they have additional binders. And I always recommend taking a look through these. If you can, if they're priced especially, then take a look through them, because you can get some really good deals. I was already feeling good about these 4 cards and I was definitely going to buy them. I figured, hey, I'll take a look through this binder. So tip number 4, look through the binders. The way this person priced their stuff, they just had stickers on all their things. Red for $1, yellow for $2. I think that's exactly what it was. Blue for $3, that type of thing. So it was a cheap binder, and I knew it was going to be a cheap binder. But they had a lot of good stuff in there, and it picked up 8 cards. Let's take a look. So this one's probably not too exciting. The red sticker was $1 cards. And I really just like this judge because I think it's funny to use in YouTube videos and making content. So I wanted to grab it. Much more interestingly, the yellow sticker was $2 cards. This is a card that I've wanted ever since it came out, and people have been pricing it like crazy. The price has come down quite a bit. So I've been looking for this card for basically months, watching the price go down, but people not selling it at that price. And even online, people are still selling for like $10-ish Canadian. And the actual price of it is like $4.50 on TCG Player. It's just that TCG Player sucks for Canadians. You get dinged with a lot of issues with shipping and stuff, so you can't really buy from there. And like I said, I got this for $2. I literally saw this card in like 4 or 5 other people's binders, and I think the next cheapest one was $8. A lot of like $10 plus for this exact card. So super stoked to get this. It's just such a kind of weird card that reminds me of, maybe dating myself a little bit here, of Reboot, the show. And for some reason that just, it's not even a show that I like that much, but I just find it funny, and I really like Sam Azenta. So super happy to get that. And then once I saw that, I was like, oh, there's a ton of IRs in here. This IR Boulder, that's a cheap card, but I didn't have it in my collection. Yeah, I got it for $2, and it's really less than $2, $1.78 in value. Totally fine. But there's legit IRs in here. There's Rotom. It's $3.95 value. Again, I got for $2, and I like this card quite a bit. The IR prices are going down on a lot of these. So really cool. You can get a lot of really cool cards for pretty cheap now. Super happy to start seeing that. This is another one that I've been keeping my eye out for, this Hops Wooloo, and it was like $10+ in a lot of binders. And again, I got this for $2. This is worth, $3.80 or so. So this person is still very generous with how they're pricing these things. Like this binder was very generously priced. They were definitely getting a lot of attraction. This Definitely interesting. I'm curious if it's like a tactic to get people to buy bigger stuff, but I'm not sure if that works personally. There's a lot of people that go to these and just search their binders, myself included, because buying cards like this online ends up being weirdly expensive. Like it would cost me $10 to order this from eBay versus $2 cash to get it from a binder. Another really cool IR, this Toxtricity. Super stoked to grab this as well. This IR looks sick. $2 again. And this thing is, worth a little less than $3, but that's still a great deal. Clan Pearl, kind of like it's not my favorite, but Destined Rivals IR, worth $3 and a bit again, and again spent $2 on it. And then the Spidoffs, kind of cool. I really like the green motif, the Team Rocket in the background. And Destined Rivals is just like a really cool set. So getting some of these cheap IRs, super happy about. Spidoffs was actually kind of worth a little more than $5. And again, I only spent $2 on this. This stack of IRs and stuff was worth $15. And I got so many. Imagine trying to get these from packs. This would have been like hundreds of dollars worth of packs just to get these. Now, all in, so you can see all the stickers and the pricing on here, all in from this vendor. This all added up to like $120, and these were already good deals because he underconditioned them, and I offered them $100 cash, tip 2, and literally a $100 bill that I had. Pulled it out, I was like, I'll give you $100 cash for this, and he's like, yep. They don't even, he didn't even question it because I had cash in hand. Super stoked about that. Hey, if you want to learn more about sick vintage cards like this Feraligatr, this really cool mid-era Lucario EX, or even modern cards like this cheap but really awesome looking Hops Wooloo, make sure you subscribe. I do tons of deep dives on cards like these. I share hidden gems, and I have a lot of bangers. I have a fairly large collection I've been collecting for basically since the beginning, since base set. So there's some really sick cards in here that I love to talk about, love to show off. And I do giveaways and stuff all the time. So make sure you subscribe, follow me on the various socials. Really appreciate it. Okay, that brings us to tip number 5, what I'm going to call extras. So I went to another vendor, and again, I was looking for vintage stuff and came across this Ampharos. Now, I find this card quite charming with this cheeky, weird Ampharos on it, looking back, looking goofy. Like I mentioned in another video, Ampharos was weirdly pushed as a popular Pokemon in the early going. It's really died off now, but there was a lot of Ampharos cards for a couple generations after these Gen 2 Neo sets came out. This card in near mint is valued at $97. So seeing the $40 price tag is what drew me over, because that's less than half. Now, you can see that the condition is not the best here. And I'd bought from this vendor before, literally the last card show I was at, and got a ton of great vintage stuff. And it was the exact same as my previous tip, looking for condition. He had a bunch of mid-tier condition things that I knew I could get good value on. Now again, there's some kind of dirt here that I'll be able to clean off. You can see it's a little chewed up on the top, but overall the front is pretty good. And we're already talking about less than half the value of the card before even haggling at all. So we're off to a good start. The back is actually pretty chewed. So this is what I would call an HP card, not the other card that they classified as HP, like that Sabrina card. There's kind of a scratch through the middle here. It's just whitening around every edge. It's clearly been ground on something. These are the cards that I would never buy online, or try very hard not to buy online, because if you can see all this, usually there's worse stuff, creasing and stuff that they've hidden through pictures. Now the front didn't look so bad, so I was still interested in it. Before I get to the actual price I paid there, let's talk about this next card. I decided to look through the binders, just like I mentioned you should always do in the previous tip, and just saw this cheap Urshifu here for 50 cents. There were some other cards I wanted, but decided to focus on just the Ampharos here. And one of the things that stood out to me with this Urshifu, yeah, it's a cheap card. It's only like $1 card. He had it in this sleeve that is super beat up, so people were passing over. And it's not super popular, but I needed it for my collection. Under the sleeve, it's basically near mint. It's a pretty modern card. There's nothing wrong with it. So people pass it over because of this ugly sleeve. It's a cheap card. I pulled it out of the binder and then went back to discussing the Ampharos. And we discussed a little bit. We talked about condition of this. And when things are in worse condition, it's easier to haggle. Haggle might be like too negative of a word, but it's just like a natural discussion of like, hey, this card is pretty beat up. I might want it because I'm putting it in a binder. I'm putting it like I'm an actual collector. I'm not like trying to resell or anything like that. People usually resonate with that type of thing. So I offered them $30 cash and they just threw in the extra card. Now, this may not be the best example, but I've done it with like 5 cards before where I buy one medium to bigger thing and they'll just throw in the other stuff. So $30 cash for a card that is $97. And the comparables online are like $50-ish for something this condition. So I'm getting a pretty good deal, better than I would online. This card is good enough for my binder. Ampharos is not my favorite, so I don't want to spend $100 on an Ampharos. So getting this for $30 and then just throw in kind of cheap V card that I also need. Great way to get lots of cheap cards. Okay, on to tip number 6, trades. I know I had said that cash is king, and it absolutely is, but when you combine it with trading, it can be very powerful. The reason I have this as a separate tip is trading is kind of an art of its own. You can't just blindly go up to every vendor and expect the most value out of what you're trying to trade. Some vendors, they'll lowball you and trade at 60% or things like that, really low, and fine, they're trying to make stuff, trying to make money off of what you're trading them. And really, if they're not getting cash for something, they're not making money while vending. You have to recognize that depending on what they have set out. So if I'm looking for vintage cards or XY cards, whatever I'm looking for, I'll look for vendors that have those and some of the stuff similar to what I'm trading. So I had my trade binder with me, and this is a person I've traded with before. In my last video, I got a Primal Kyogre Ultra Rare, a $230 card, which I traded a Reshiram from Legendary Treasures plus some cash. Figured, hey, I have some more cards from the same set. Maybe they're interested. So I went to them, they looked through my binder. While they were looking through my binder, I was looking through their collection and they had some interesting stuff. Wow. So the first thing that jumped out to me was this Lucario EX and the $70 price tag. Now, straight on from here, it probably looks perfect or quite good. So I will pop it out. But this card is $200 normally. A near mint version of this card is $200. So it being priced at $70, I knew that there was going to be something wrong with it, but I figured I'd take a look anyways. Got them to show it to me. And there absolutely is something wrong with it. So this is the type of card I don't normally buy. It's got a bunch of dents right here. Kind of hard to see. They're not creases, they're dents. Because, these XY era cards have like this textured, raised pattern, the dents are more likely to happen. You can see it's not the best on the edges, but still pretty good. Now, we're talking 35% of the near mint value right off the bat at that $70 mark. I was chatting with them and they were like, yeah, I just priced it at $70. Is like, price it low enough to try and get rid of it quickly. So when someone says that, you should be perking up because deals are there to be made. So again, you can see a condition pretty whitened. I'd call this an HP card or even damaged. Comparables online are still way more expensive than the $70 mark. So I was interested in it. And again, this is about the trade. So I traded this person. I let them go through my binder, which has like 200 cards in it. And they scoped out the Legendary Treasures cards, 2 Radiant Collection Pikachus and the Radiant Collection Meloetta to go perfectly with the Reshiram that I traded them, which they still had in their collection. With trading, vendors trade at percentages. So you want someone who's honest about that. This person says they trade at 80%. That's kind of industry standard right now. So I'm good with that. And they're very diligent about looking up modern prices. Like they went to eBay last solds for the cards I was trading them, found out that, the Pikachus are being sold for like $55 each and the Meloetta similar, like $50. So they calculated all that up and 80% was like $130. They actually offered me trade value of $135. At that point, I was like, yes, I'll definitely trade you those or sell them to you, whatever, because that's great value for them. I actually sold one of those Pikachus a couple weeks ago and I got $35 cash for it. So I should have just waited because he basically gave me $45 worth of value for it. So great deal right off the bat. And after knowing how much those were worth, I was like, okay, I'm still interested in this Lucario. But what I was really interested in was this Feraligatr. Now this is a sick card. I wasn't planning on spending this much on any individual card while there, but because he was offering great trade value, and I'd worked with him before, always a pleasure to deal with, I figured, hey, I'll take a look at this. Now $100 is right on near mint market. So I was like, oh, this better be near mint than it is. The card is in really good condition. The hollow effect is, I don't know if the camera does it justice, but it's like, it's so sick. Looks great from the front. It just needs a little cleaning up here. Really good from the back. There's just a tiny bit of whitening at the top. So at $100, I normally wouldn't buy this card, but he's offering me great trade value. And then I was kind of humming and hawing, deciding which cards I wanted. I hadn't like committed to anything here. Great trade value. And then he's like, hey, give me $15 cash on top of the trade, $130 trade value, and I'll give you these two cards. So I basically paid $60 for the Lucario and $90 for the Feraligatr. I'd actually traded for more than I would have got selling the cards that he took. It was hard to really quantify that. Two sick cards for $15 and what I probably would have got maybe $100 cash for. Super stoked about that. So if you use trading correctly, it can be incredibly powerful. Again, look for people who have stuff that's very similar or even the exact cards that you're trying to trade. Make sure your condition is good because vendors only want really good condition. My stuff was near mint because the stuff I pulled right from the booster box from the Radiant collection way back in the day and just had sitting around. If your stuff is near mint, you will be able to trade it. You just got to find the right people. And they had the stuff I was interested in, so it was a match made in heaven. Okay, there's one more tip and one more deal to be had. This kind of combines everything we have talked about except for the trading and one more tip. So tip number 7, find cards that you know have been sitting for a while. So there's this vendor that I've seen in a bunch of card shows and I always check out their stuff. They have a ton of great cards, a lot of times out of my price range because they're really expensive cards. And typically this would have been out of my price range and it was not something I was looking for. I said I was going to get Team Rocket and I basically got no Team Rocket. I ended up with a bunch of Neo set stuff, which I still love. And this one was no different. Wow. I picked up a Shining Magikarp. This card is so sick. One of my favorites of all time. And it's in the Celebrations collection, so it's clearly a lot of other people's favorites because they reprinted it with a little Pikachu symbol. Now, the original is what I want because I hate that Celebration symbol. The other reason I've always wanted this card is because I have its sibling, Shining Gyarados. Got this, 10 to 15 years ago in a collection by the first edition Shining Gyarados. And this is one of the kind of grails of my collection, so to speak. And it always felt weird not having a Shining Magikarp to go with it. Now, this is not first edition. I'm not going to spend, $800 on a card when I can get 100 $8 cards or, $50, $20 cards or something like that. So there's so much good stuff out there. But I leveraged tip 7, find cards that have been sitting around for a while. I've seen this card around in this person's case for months, basically, and nobody's bought it. The $230 price tag was intriguing right off the bat. I saw that he had it marked HP. So this is where the other kind of tips come into play. Going to a card show. I was dealing in cash. I had enough cash to pay for this. The condition thing. So it was marked HP. The market price for one of these near mint is depends where you're looking. It's between $400 and $600. So the $230 for HP is pretty reasonable. I checked the comparables on eBay and typically they go for 300-ish for this type of condition. So it's a pretty good deal, a $230. So, looking at the front of this, we got to clean this and a little raising in the corner there. Stuff that you can flatten out really easily and that you don't notice in a binder. And the back has a little bit of whitening on it, and this bottom corner is why it's marked HP. Now, again, I wouldn't call this HP necessarily. A lot of people would call this MP, and some people who are maybe a little less honest would call it LP because there's only one mark. But that means, again, I'm leveraging that condition tip to find something for probably way less than its value. Like if I turned around, I could probably sell this for over $300 online. I'm surprised he didn't. Selling cards that expensive can be tough. There's less buyers for things like that. Now I've sold cards. I sold my Poncho Pikachus for $9,000. So there is a market for these super expensive things. Yeah, knowing that this was sitting there for a while and chatting with the vendor for a little bit, I offered him $200 cash directly. We kind of talked a little bit back and forth and agreed to split the difference at $215. And at $215, this is a great buy. It's one of my chase cards that I've had for a little while. I wasn't planning on getting it right now because I'm focusing on Rocket. But I love this card. It looks so sweet, especially next to my first edition Shining Gyarados. These are just like two of the coolest Wizards of the Coast cards ever printed. There we go. That was all the cards I got from this last card show. I really wanted to show the cards off because I love showing off Pokemon cards, talking about them. If you want to let me know what your favorite of these is, I would love to chat about it. I mean, I got some super modern stuff, some Destined Rival stuff, there's some Sword and Shield stuff, and then a lot of vintage stuff, which is what I was going for because the price is more stable with the vintage stuff. Let me know which of these cards is your favorite. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious for me, it's the Shining Magikarp. I wasn't planning on spending that much money, but it was just perfect timing. Everything kind of came together. I got like just a ton of great stuff here again. My collection is really coming together really rapidly by going to these card shows and finding deals. In between the card shows, I'm kind of selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace and building up this cash. So I've basically been playing with house money, so to speak, from selling some of my old collection because I've been collecting for so long. And I'm selling duplicates. I'm not selling any stuff that's in my actual personal collection. So yeah, let me know which one's your favorite. Hopefully these 7 tips are useful to you. Definitely go to some of your local card shows, or even some of the bigger ones that are thrown on, like that you see Deep Pocket Monster go to and stuff like that. I'm up in Canada, so we don't get too many of the huge ones like that, except for maybe in Toronto. But here around where I live, we get decent sized ones. I think there was like 30 to 35 vendors at the one I went to, and just near Christmas time, so it was maybe one of the smaller shows. Lots of deals to be had if you pay attention to these tips especially. So happy hunting. And you should definitely check out this video from my last card show where I talked about that Primal Kyogre, which is one of my favorite pickups of the past year. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe.